Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host, and today we have a very interesting guest, Matt Holder. Now, Matt, a number of things make you very interesting as a guest here. Not only have you been and currently are a chief sales officer, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit more about what you're doing right now. You've been a chief technology officer. You've been a chief executive officer multiple times, and you started out as an engineer, but you also went into business management. And so you've been a revenue leader for a long time. You've overseen revenue operations for over €1 billion, very large organizations. I think right now you're working with subsidiaries, like 60 some odd subsidiaries all over the world. So you're a busy guy, and I really appreciate getting a slice of your time here. What I would love to do, though, is give you an opportunity to maybe expand a little bit more on your background. I'd love to even hear a little bit about your scuba diving expertise and dealing with sharks. That was an interesting part of our conversation.
Super, Steve. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for having me around. And also, hi to the audience. Yeah, my background, I spent my whole career in the field of printing, packaging, and equipment around that. Now into recycling. You were somehow confronted with the outcome of my work. Every weekend you work for grocery shopping because it's either the packaging or it's the processing of the content or it's the recycling afterwards. That's what drives me. What's the fun part of my life? Well, not really, but that's the fun part of my work at least. And looking forward to that. Outside of work, it's scuba diving. As excitement never can't be too much, I really prefer scuba dive in wrecks. And if whenever possible, I love diving with sharks because there's always a shark tank somewhere. That's what makes things interesting.
Well, absolutely. That's a bit of a thrill seeker that a lot of us don't have inside of us. I got to hand it to you there. What we want to talk about today is how you have, over the years, the title of our episode is The Revenue Logic of Customer Obsession. And I want to start out asking a little bit about how we understand, as you build revenue, you've overseen massive, large revenue engines, that as we start to understand revenue, where do we have to start? Starting with market changes and signals, and then leading into how we adapt and understand the customer obsession, how that drives our revenue. But if you could maybe start us out by, how do we stay ahead? How do we stay ahead of where the market's going and the signals that we're seeing? That's all we know is our big job, but that's really hard to do. But I'd love to get your perspective on that.
It's pretty easy. And being in sales, we are really the key connecting point because we talk to customers. We know what's going on out there. From my understanding, we have to even get a step further to understand what is going on with the customers of my customer so that we really can help them. This gives us the feeling, this gives us the idea of what is going on, where do markets develop to, and actually what does that mean for us? How can we react on that? Our business, how can we adapt our business accordingly? So that's my basic understanding of how can I make sure that I will be successful in the market with my business.
What are some of the early warning signs that you see and that you look out for? Because staying ahead of the market is everybody's job. But again, you said it's easy. If we could do that, we have that crystal ball that would be worth €1 billion. How do you stay ahead of the market? What are the signals that you're looking for?
Of course, it's the magic sales crystal ball I polish every weekend. To see where I'm going. No, but if you see revenue declining already, it's too late. Or not too late, you're in a very advanced step of decline. Revenue is very late stage in that process, which always follows a certain pattern. The first warning signs always is if you have a mismatch, if you realize a mismatch on your stakeholders level, if you realize a mismatch with your customers, with your markets, with the market organizations, what's going on there. This always is a point where I see, let's put up attention, because always from there, the next step really will lead into a strategy crisis. You do not know what's going on anymore out there, so you don't adapt a proper strategy in your business. From there, you go actually into misaligned products, misaligned sales, and then you stop selling at a certain point. The real warning signs always is when you see my internal organization is mainly focused on their own issues, on discussions, on processes, on internal stuff, and not on what's going on with the customer anymore. It's not on what's really happening out there. It's about structures. It's about reportings, reporting structures, all that, while conversation about customer itself and customer needs is vanishing in the whole organization. That's a very critical point, which I've seen many times in the market. And what I always say, markets rarely collapse overnight. They whisper. They really whisper before they scream. And you need to have your ears at that point. You need to know your customers, customers, and see what's happening there. And then you can react.
You know, it's interesting. When you and I first got together and we were talking about what we wanted to talk about in this podcast, and I asked you a question that I ask every C-suite executive that comes onto the podcast. What do you see as the two greatest challenges for creating long-term sustainable growth? The number one answer across over 100 C-suite executives I've asked that question of is internal alignment is the number one challenge. One of the things that you brought up there very clearly was when you're not in tune with where the market's going and you're internally driven by your own product, your own reporting, the proposals that you're putting out, and it's very easy to get very internally focused. But if you're not focused on the customer and their customer, because that's what they're worried about really is ultimately is impacting their customers. So I love the focus on not only the customer, but internal alignment. By the time you get to the place where you're like, geez, we're really not aligned, that's the status quo of most organizations. It's why it's the number one challenge. If that's one of the symptoms of being out of step with the customer, how do you talk to your sales team about staying in step with the customer? And we talked about that as customer obsession, right? It raises it to a new bar. It's not just have some conversations, make sure you're in touch with the customer. Being obsessed with the customer is a different level that you talked about, right? And why is that so important?
It's very easy. If you're approaching your customers just to fulfill your numbers, just to fill your funnel to get your revenues, your order intakes, it's something which they realize. So you do not get the trust. You do not earn the trust from the customers, and they will just treat you as what you are in that moment. You're just a sales guy. But if you understand your customers' markets, so the customer's customer, you can consult your customer. You can help him getting the right solution. You can guide him into a business solution, into a business case for his business, and you become the partner. You will become a trusted partner of your customer, and he will be listening. And if you live that, you will never reach that point where you say, oh, I'm so obsessed by my internal structures, procedures, and so on. You always will think in the world of the customer. What's his issues, what's his demands, what's his problems, and I can help him solving them. For me personally, this always is this transition also from understanding my customers and their markets. What does that mean for my business? What does that mean for my products, for my services? And how do I adapt this into my own production, into my own portfolio, and in my own solutions? So that on the front end, again, I can be successful.
So you brought up trust, and I want to make sure that we don't just gloss over that. It was really interesting. I had a conversation with the CEO, and her company works with all kinds of industries and go-to-market capacity. And she said, we're talking to C-suite executives that are customers, that are prospects. And because of the market dynamic and the changes in AI and just everybody's rethinking everything, they're becoming much more risk averse. What I'm putting together with what you're saying there and building that trust, they're looking for more than just a point solution. They're looking for a provider that's going to be there and is going to help them wade through this market uncertainty and this change. They need a partner to help them through that. And that's beyond product and service and pricing, that trust. How important is that? All the studies show that like when the RFP comes out, a company makes a decision that they need to hire or reevaluate a contract, that they put a short list together on day one, and that's who they buy from 95% of the time. So if you're not in a trusted position beforehand, you're not on that short list, you're out, right?
Yep. And absolutely. Absolutely. We always say people buy from people. So you need to gain that trust. So you need to gain the trust as a brand. You need to be a trusted brand. You need to be a trusted person. You need to be there for your customer. And never underestimate, especially talking capital investment, global machinery business. As a vendor, we have that global overview. We know the markets globally. We know trends globally. We know trends locally, regionally. So we typically have a much deeper insight into the whole overall business situation than the customer has, who is occupied by his day-to-day business and running the business and troubleshoot day-to-day and all of that. We can tell him, hey, hold on, this is happening on a certain range and that is happening on the other range. What's your positioning? Where do you want to go? What do you want to achieve with the investment you're going for, so that you can be successful in your business again? And then we can start a conversation and saying, okay, maybe this or maybe that or the other one, but this is what I would recommend you for your business, for your solution.
And we can come in as vendors and try to sell. We can come in as consultants and try to lead them through the market. And you're right, you have a perspective on the market that they don't have. And most of us as companies, they don't talk to as many of their peers as we do. They don't have a handle on the market like we do. And are you seeing that in this time of rapid change and technology and innovation, that they're needing a trusted advisor more than ever? And that role of building trust is more important. We all know it's been important. You can go back 20 years, 30 years, that's always been important. But why is it more important today than ever?
Markets changing much faster than they used to do. And you said, okay, let's 25 years back or 20 years back. That was exactly the time when I started as a young engineer after university. And I started in the consulting branch of a big capital investment company, one of the biggest producer in that field, printing machines. And we had just one goal and one target: understand your customer, help him develop his strategy, help him derive the proper solution, the proper technical solution, fully independently, whether it's our own solution or something else, or no solution at all. This took me to places where I said, okay, don't do it. Do not invest, because this is not what you need. And this creates a base, a trust base. Those guys will always come back to you and ask for advice, ask for support. This is something which they really will remember. And it gives you a customer relation which you do not gain if you're just the salesperson bringing quote by quote.
So how do you translate this? This is obviously then a way that you have to instill this into your sales team. You're not out there on the front line having every single conversation. And this isn't necessarily a natural tendency to have customer obsession at the level that you and I are talking about right now. How do you train the sales team to be customer obsessed and connect the dots for them? You put the time and the effort to understand you're going to get more contracts. You're going to get a bigger book of business. What's that kind of conversation and that training look like, and just as a top level?
It's very easy. It's making them understanding that they need to sit down with the customer and understand his needs and his requirements before walking out the door with a quote under their arm, or even several quotes, which they then throw on the table and say, select one. This is not sales. This is just understand your customer, sit down, talk to him, understand his demands, his requirements. And then even if you leave the door without putting something on the table, tell him, okay, customer, I understood. I got your ideas. I got your demands. Let me think about it. I will come back to you tomorrow, day after, with a suggestion on how we can tackle that, on how we can work on that together, so that you get forward with your request and your business, because now I really understand what you're looking for. The customers don't buy equipment, they buy business solutions. And in a very quickly changing world as we have today, they are happy about each support they can get to secure that decision and to get advice on that decision, to be a bit more on the safer side. And that's what we can bring in as specialists in our products, in our markets, in actually what happens there.
I was talking to another CRO last week, and I asked him, I said, what's the competitive advantage of your sales team? If it isn't the product or the service, and it says, we've got a really good product, we've got a really good service, we got really good pricing, but rapid innovation on our technology and our services, everybody's catching up. Everybody responds to an RFP. Everybody says they check all the boxes. It's really hard to compete on straight product, service, pricing alone. And he started talking about what you're talking about. And he said, the competitive advantage of our sales team is the insights they have into the market and their customers.
Correct. Correct. And you always have to ask yourself, will my solution increase the customer's productivity, quality, cost base, give him competitive advantage, make sure the capital invested is invested right. And it's not just, okay, I have a sale, I walk out the door and never will come back again.
So do you, as part of your training, we strive really hard to be in the right room with the right people at the right time, asking the right questions. And we can be in the right room at the right time with the right people. But if we're not asking the right questions, then we're going to miss that opportunity. Do you help your sales team in terms of asking the right questions in order to get to the true insights that we're looking for? Independently across the team, across the world, nobody's coming up with all the right answers. And do you, as part of the training, to help them, here's the kind of questions you need to ask to get to the right answers, to get in the right conversations?
Absolutely. The basic underlying idea behind that is not to talk technology, but really sit down with the customer and talk about his business needs, which of course requires my sales guys to understand a little bit about the business itself and what's the target there, the customer's customer again, and then talk to your sales guy, to your customer, what's your current problems in your market. You're selling, you're not selling, you have quality issues. What's your feedback from your market, from your customers? These are the questions we need to understand, we need to ask, so that we can, in the office, put together a suitable offer for the customer and say, hey, okay, I understood you're facing this and this problems in your markets. We know from our understanding of the market that this and this is required. So, dear customer, I would suppose that we look for that and look for this, because this helps you in this aspect and this helps you in the other aspect. And so we get to a point where we really talk business much more before we basically talk solution and technology. And this is what customers today expect. Quite simply, think back the automotive industry like 20 years, 30 years maybe. Everybody was talking horsepower and speed and how strong the car, the machine was, the engine was. Today we talk consumption, we talk safety, we talk sustainability, and all of that completely changed. We talk solutions. We don't talk technology anymore. And solution always means addressing a certain business need.
So I've always found that the more that you can talk the market, the trends, where it's going, then they're much more open to talking about their challenges and what they're seeing, because it's a two-way exchange. If you come in and say, I've got 2 or 3 options on a proposal here, but tell me a little bit about your industry, your market, what's going on. They don't want to educate you, right? Their job is not, in fact, they get very frustrated if they feel like they're educating the salesperson on a call. So it's a very interesting balance of, if you come in talking like a professional, talking like a consultant, a knowledgeable person that is worthy of being listened to, then they're much more open. And now you're going to get those insights. So it's almost like the process to unlock them to truly start talking about what's really bothering them and what they're really dealing with and what they don't really know how to solve is you position yourself as an expert to begin with, because then they're willing to get to open up. But here's the problem. They're waiting longer and longer to want to talk to us. Another CRO, he said, look, Steve, he says, we're having fewer conversations that are farther apart and that are shorter than we used to be. They're farther apart, shorter. And so our opportunity when we're in front of the prospect, the buyer, is more limited than it is before. So we have to make the absolute most out of that moment. Is that a trend you're seeing as well? The contact with the customer and how infrequent and how long you have with them to accomplish what you're talking about. Is that a trend that you're seeing as well?
Yes, it is. And I think you have to differentiate whether we're talking to a new account, to a new customer, which we just approached for the first time. We have to come through the door and say, basically convince him, gain that trust that he accepts us as an expert in the field. For sure, everything else is just wasted time. And then I think we as a sales organization, we need to make sure we see our existing customers often enough to keep that bond, to keep that trust. Stop by, even if there's nothing to really discuss on a business level at the moment. Just step by, see how he's doing, ask him questions about, hey, how is your business running? Because then again, this is knowledge you collect for yourself to understand your markets and to understand then the customers again of your customers, and then keep the touch, not just sales, but keep that touch to your customers. And also, whenever possible, try to be on or visit trade fairs or something where your customers exhibit, because this again is where you can start to talk to their customers and understand what's going on there, getting that market insights, fairs, conferences, whatsoever, even maybe visit them directly, whether even if you have the contact.
How do you tie, going back to the title of our conversation here, the revenue logic of customer obsession? Because there's always so many variables that impact revenue. It's not one thing, but how do you tie the one thing of customer obsession into growing revenue? In your mind, when you're in front of the board, when you're in front of investors, that's all they care about is revenue, right? So they're not asking how you're doing it as much they are, but it's more that you're growing revenue. And if you're not, then I'm going to really start asking a lot of questions, right? So how do you connect customer obsession with growing revenue?
Very easy. As I mentioned earlier, if the first thing you bring to your customer's meeting is a quote already, you haven't asked the right question and you haven't spent enough time on that. You haven't taken the chance to build that trust situation. If you gain that trust, if you're with the customer on eye level as an advisor, as a supporter, as a partner, all price discussion becomes second. And this itself already is a big benefit in all sales. Now, again, sales discussions, sales situations. Once you have the trust, he might not even look at a second or third vendor because he says, hey, this guy told me exactly what to do. While all the other ones, they just throw their quotes on my table and said, here, this is what I can offer you without understanding what I'm doing. This is what really makes sustainable growth. And this is why customers stick to a brand, stick to even a salesperson. So it's also very critical if a salesperson is switching companies or leaving companies, retiring, whatsoever. You need to make sure that the next one is stepping into this trust situation, because this will keep your relation with the customer and actually keep your revenue stream. Technology changes, market change, product change, all very regular. But what's really constant is that your customer's business is changing even faster. And you need to understand that and be there, talk to them, and understand the challenges they have. That's really the big point.
So a couple of things I'm putting together, connecting the dots from what you're saying here, and whether it's having those calls where you're asking the right questions, talking to them about their customers, going to the right conventions, going to their booths, talking to their customers there. You've laid out a number of different ways that you're gaining insights that they don't have time to do. They don't talk to their peer community as much as you do. You're selling to their peer community every single day. I read a study recently that scientists are looked upon as experts at a 76% degree level. The peers to us in our own industry are at that exact same level, 76%. So if you can represent their peer community, who they look to, that's how they look to for validation, right? What are my peers doing? What are people doing the same thing here? If you can be a true reflection of their peer community and you're seen as somebody that's constantly active and talking to their peer community and bringing those insights in, your credibility goes up significantly. Is that a good takeaway? Because that's what I was taking away from our conversation here.
It is. And even further, I would take it even a step further. Being that representation of the peer group, you can give him advice completely separated from the peer group or different advice from the peer group, because this is what everybody does. Do that. Because this will differentiate you. That's a bonus I think you can bring in, stepping out of this or not being part of the peer group, but representing or reflecting the peer group, you can consult him completely differently. And internally, talking the revenue stream again, talking to your customer, understanding their markets, the customer's customer, it gives you the right base to decide on your sales strategy. It gives you the right base to decide on your products and develop your products and all the value stream within your own company, because this is then completely focused on the customer solution on the front side again. So this gives you the products which will sell.
I love this. It's the market perspective. We started out by talking about how do you stay ahead of market changes and dynamics. And I think we spent the entire time here talking about how you stay in tune with that and how that's the core of your consulting. And as a reflection through the peer community of who you're selling to, you're talking to more people in the markets than they ever will. I would love to have you give, because we've covered so much territory, and I wish we had another hour of conversation here for all the C-suite executives that are going to be consuming this podcast. If there was one thing that you wanted them to take away from our conversation, if nothing else, take this away, what would that be?
Let's be a bit provocational there. Never fall in love with your products. Fall in love with your customers, your customer success. Products change, technology change, market change. Customer expectations and challenges change even faster. So stay in touch with your customers. I think that's the absolutely key takeaway we have to really focus on.
I love it. I think you just bottled up the entire episode and what we all should be doing more and more in 2 sentences there. And I just got to say that the mission of this podcast is to talk to different C-suite executives from all over the world, that we all have incredible insights and perspectives and experiences that we can bring to the table. And if we do, just like you have today, that's the rising tide that lifts all boats. And you did a phenomenal job on that today,
Thank you
being
very
a
much.
part of that rising tide. Yeah, thank you, Matt, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, really my pleasure. And thank you very much.